Welcome to the AM Update, Week in Review. A collection of the best moments from Aaron McIntire's morning update.
And now here's this. JD Vance spoke at the Munich Security Conference late last week in Germany. It's one of the best foreign policy speeches I have ever heard. It's about 20 minutes long. You should listen to the entire thing. This, in my opinion, is probably the best 3 minutes from that speech. Again, listen to this speech. JD Vance, I would like to stipulate something to you. Think about this while you listen to it. JD Vance is the this prominent political figure. You heard his voice earlier in today's episode. He is the antithesis of this prominent political figure. Listen to this.
And unfortunately, when I look at Europe today, it's sometimes not so clear what happened to some of the Cold War's winners. I look to Brussels, where EU commissars warn citizens that they intend to shut down social media during times of civil unrest the moment they spot what they've judged to be, quote, hateful content. Or to this very country, where police have carried out raids against citizens suspected of posting anti-feminist comments online as part of, quote, combating misogyny on the internet, a day of action. I look to Sweden, where 2 weeks ago the government convicted a Christian activist for participating in Koran burnings that resulted in his friend's murder. And as the judge in his case chillingly noted, Sweden's laws to supposedly protect free expression do not, in fact, grant, and I'm quoting, a free pass to do or say anything without risking offending the group that holds that belief. And perhaps most concerningly, I look to our very dear friends, the United Kingdom, where the backslide away from conscience rights has placed the basic liberties of religious Britons in particular in the crosshairs. A little over 2 years ago, the British government charged Adam Smith Connor, a 51-year-old physiotherapist and an Army veteran, with the heinous crime of standing 50 meters from an abortion clinic and silently praying for 3 minutes. Not obstructing anyone, not interacting with anyone, just silently praying on his own. And after British law enforcement spotted him and demanded to know what he was praying for, Adam replied simply, it was on behalf of the unborn son he and his former girlfriend had aborted years before. Now, the officers were not moved. Adam was found guilty of breaking the government's new buffer zones law, which criminalizes silent prayer and other actions that could influence a person's decision within 200 meters of an abortion facility. He was sentenced to pay thousands of pounds in legal costs to the prosecution. Now, I wish I could say that this was a fluke, a one-off crazy example of a badly written law being enacted against a single person. But no, this last October, just a few months ago, the Scottish government began distributing letters to citizens whose houses lay within so-called safe access zones, warning them that even private prayer within their own homes may amount to breaking the law. Naturally, the government urged readers to report any fellow citizens suspected guilty of thought crime. In Britain and across Europe, free speech, I fear, is in retreat.
That is JD Vance, Vice President JD Vance, at the Munich Security Conference late last week in Germany, confronting to the faces of European leadership just how far they have fallen. All of these Eurotrash leaders who claim to be paragons of capital D democracy, being confronted with their own draconian, really dystopian policies when it comes to free speech. And here is JD Vance, the American, coming along and telling them off to their faces. I asked you before who JD Vance is the antithesis to. JD Vance is the anti-Barack Obama. Whereas Barack Obama spent the first year in office, and really the entirety of his time in office, apologizing for the United States over and over and over again. JD Vance comes in, and his very first few weeks in office as vice president, not the head of state, as the vice president, repeatedly telling European leaders and really putting the entire world on notice, America is the leader. You will listen to us. You will come correct. And if you do not, as JD Vance said later on during his speech at the Munich Security Conference, if you do not, there's nothing we can do for you, because there's nothing you can do for yourselves. If you continue to treat each and every one of your citizens with supreme disdain and suspicion, there's nothing we can do for you, because there's nothing you can do for yourselves. JD Vance is the best political communicator since the great communicator, Ronald Reagan, and I do not think that's up for debate. He is better at articulating America first than Donald Trump is himself, and Donald Trump, I think, has gotten better at that as time has gone on. JD Vance is shaping up to be a generational talent. Whoever is writing his speeches is immensely talented as well, if it's not JD Vance himself. You need to listen to the entire speech, because JD Vance is the anti-Obama. He is the antithesis, the right side up of Obama's upside down. Man alive, it's incredible watching some of these developments play out that I just really never thought about 4 months ago. I never really thought we would see in our lifetimes. And here we are. We can do it. Good can happen. And JD Vance is just one example of that in a myriad of examples that we've seen over the last few weeks.
You're listening to the AM Update, Week in Review. Follow on X and Instagram @RealAMUpdate.
When your opponents, your enemies, have mask-off moments, you better pay attention. Let's go back last week. This is CNN and Scott Jennings. He's their token conservative contributor on that network. He had a back and forth about whether or not the President of the United States has the statutory authority to actually hire and fire the people that he wants to hire and fire. He had a back and forth with this panel. Listen to this, particularly the voice at the very end.
I think is a joke. That you have these partisan hack Democrat attorney generals, they get together, and the only thing they know how to do is try to nullify the results of the last election by venue shopping these district court judges. They find the most lunatic liberals they can. They file lawsuits knowing full well they're going to try to usurp the president's authority, tie this up in court for years.
That stuff is sacrosanct. And you've got people going in there who don't know anything about that system.
But these are also just restraining orders.
Doing this. He knows nothing about it.
What you just said is so profound. You said these people don't know anything and they don't know what they're doing.
That's right.
But they're appointees.
But Elon Musk.
I understand. But they are appointees of the duly elected president. So your view, you're here as our legal expert, but your view is because you don't personally believe they know enough that the duly elected president, who appointed a Treasury Secretary and who appoints special appointees like Elon Musk, shouldn't be able to act as the president because you don't personally believe they know enough?
Well, they
is that how it works?
No.
Or do elections mean anything to you?
Well, it's got nothing to do with elections.
Oh, well, there's a little bit of a mask-off moment there. That voice that you just heard there, that's Nick Ackerman, former prosecutor, had something to do with Watergate. Now he's on CNN. And it's a career path that he chose. Talking about whether Donald Trump has the statutory authority to hire and fire the administration that he wants, the duly elected president of the United States that was certified by Congress. And he says it has nothing to do with elections. Oh, okay. Yeah, well, I think we already suspected that, but thank you for telegraphing that. Thank you for telegraphing that for us. Now we go on to what happened on Sunday. Here is Margaret Brennan. Yes, the Margaret Brennan of the I don't really care Margaret, questioning Secretary of State Marco Rubio over the aforementioned comments from JD Vance about free speech in Europe.
Well, he was standing in a country where free speech was weaponized to conduct a genocide. And he met with the head of a political party that has far-right views and some historic ties to extreme groups. The context of that was changing the tone of it. And you know that the censorship was specifically about the right.
No, I have to disagree with you. free speech was not used to conduct a genocide. The genocide was conducted by an authoritarian Nazi regime that happened to also be genocidal because they hated Jews and they hated minorities and they hated those that they had a list of people they hated, but primarily the Jews. There was no free speech in Nazi Germany. There was none. There was also no opposition in Nazi Germany. They were a sole and only party that governed that country. So that's not an accurate reflection of history.
That's a great response from Marco Rubio, by the way. So there's just two examples in the last handful of days from mainstream media mouthpieces for the old regime with total and complete mask-off moments. What's particularly amusing about the Margaret Brennan clip is there's nothing that she nor CBS can say along the lines of, well, what I was really trying to say was ... Well, I misspoke. What I really meant to say was ... No, what you communicated was, if you champion free speech, you're a Nazi. You're a Nazi. That's what you communicated. I mean, that is just retardation of the highest order mixed into a cocktail of 200 proof contempt. So two mask-off moments from different mouthpieces of the old regime and mainstream media. Got that Nick Ackerman saying that whether or not Donald Trump can hire and fire his own employees has got nothing to do with the elections. What does it have to do with then, Mr. Ackerman? And you have, I don't really care, Margaret, saying you're a Nazi if you believe in free speech. When your opponents tell you who they truly are, pay attention. Because they're never going to have a moment of self-awareness. They're never going to have a moment of introspection. Are we the baddies here? That's never going to happen. Why do we need to pay attention when they take their mask off? Because I think it'll help us underscore and motivate us to do what needs to be done to ensure that these people never see real power again. And that means to hold them accountable. Margaret Brennan should have been fired. This Nick Ackerman guy should never be allowed to see the light of day in polite society again. He should be too embarrassed, what I'm trying to say. He should be too embarrassed to show his face in public after spewing the filth that he spewed, that you just heard a few moments ago. Until that happens, these people are just going to feel more and more emboldened and empowered to do and say whatever the hell they want to say. And be assured, what they want to do and say is hell. CC Telfer is the first man to cheat his way to a women's NCAA title in 2019. He went on CNN to explain why he can't be stripped of his title because that's not how any of this works.
I wonder how you react, though, when you read that the Department of Education has written a letter to the NCAA suggesting that transgender women who have won titles and set records, they should be stripped.
If somebody's truly working or a part of the Department of Education, they would be smart and educated enough to know that something like that that's not how history works, and that's not how the direction of progressiveness works, and you can't take back history.
You can't take back history. That is the voice of CC Telfer, the first man to cheat his way to a women's NCAA title in 2019. The Department of Education, of course, sent a letter to the NCAA saying that men who competed in female sports should be stripped of their titles. Rightly so. You can't take back history. Now, I'm not the smartest cookie in the box, not the smartest light bulb in the socket. You can tell I'm mixing metaphors here. That should be indication enough. But I'm not a half-wit, not a full wit. I'm kind of a three-quarters wit. I'm just spitballing here, asking questions. Mr. CC, you are a man. I'm sorry. You prefer to be referred to as a woman, but you were a man. Okay. So again, this is taking every single synapse in my brain to put all of this together. So that would seem to indicate at one point you were a man and you did identify as a boy or a man, but now you don't because you want to be referred to as a she and a her. So, man, what am I getting at here? It seems I don't know. It seems like maybe you can take back history, at least by your own admission. You can take back history because you used to be a man and now you want to be called a woman. I mean, everybody knows you're still a man, okay? Everybody knows you're still a man. But we're just going to humor you for a little bit here, Cece. So it seems like you can take back history a little bit. Or maybe, in the left's view, a lot of bit. Let's just take a walk down memory lane, shall we? Christopher Columbus statue removed in Chicago in 2020, July 24th of 2020. Robert E. Lee statue in Richmond, Virginia, removed September 8th, 2021. Stonewall Jackson statue, also in Richmond, removed July 1st, 2020. Jefferson Davis, Frankfort, Kentucky. Memorial to Confederate soldiers and sailors in Indianapolis in June of 2020. Yeah, Confederates lost, but they're part of our history. What about this? Thomas Jefferson statue removed from New York City Hall after nearly 200 years. That was also back in 2021. So I guess if it's a certain kind of history, you can take that back.
You're listening to the AM Update, Week in Review. Follow on X and Instagram at Real AM Update.
Poll of the week, I asked you, what is the biggest threat to the early days of the new Trump administration? I gave you 4 options. Here they are in order of worst to first. Other, comment below. That's 14.5%. We'll get to those responses in just a little bit. Lethargy is one response that I gave you. 14.5% said lethargy or lethargy. I don't know how to pronounce it. Or just complacency. But I was trying to find 3 different L's because alliteration is amazing and awesome. Lethargy was in third place at 14.5%. Leaks, see ice, I was in second place at 16.7%. And litigation, see that as rogue judges, a commanding lead at 54%. So litigation, leaks, lethargy, or other. Let's see what you had to say. We'll start with Zach, who says, not pressuring Congress to pass legislation to codify what he signed executive orders on is the biggest threat to his young administration. Republicans have 2 years to get it done, Zach says. Democrats will do everything to ensure they win midterm elections. Trump didn't get it done during his first time. Hopefully, with everything we've seen, he's learned this time. All he has to do is instruct Mike Johnson to do it and post about it. That's a good reminder that this is a two-way street. Yes, I'm the guy who said that Congress is very, very, very broken right now, maybe irreparably so. But it's also a two-way street. So yeah, it's broken, but there has to be some effort from the White House to pressure them, and pressure them hard in some cases. And boy, with Elon Musk at your side and his vast wealth, don't you think this would be a good opportunity? Maybe not to completely reform Congress, but at least make a nice dent in it to begin with, by pressuring and really putting the fear of God into certain legislators who don't want to do your agenda. So that's a good reminder, Zach. Bchalk 874 says Trump himself disagrees so far. Disagree. I would have said that 8 years ago about a Trump administration, but disagree so far. He's really been on message. I even thought this Lindsay thing that the neocons were losing their poop about yesterday. I thought it was Trump branded, but still, I thought the substance of what he was saying was perfectly appropriate. So disagree. Disagree so far. Maybe that'll change in a couple of months, but no. LCLS says the biggest threat to the Trump administration, Republican weakness and cowards. Yep. Melissa B says Republicans in every elected position from federal down to dog catcher. I like what you're saying there. Clay Conry off the top rope says assassination is the biggest threat to the new administration. Redacted says there's plenty of threats. Litigation is by far the biggest threat in both volume and context. Granted, the leaks are detrimental to deportations, and there's always assassination concerns, but the rogue judges are and have been a huge problem. Hoping at least the TRO madness will end shortly with Roberts and SCOTUS help. You're talking about the temporary restraining orders there. Yeah, so I'm somewhere between litigation and leaks. So I'm somewhere in between there. I voted for leaks because I think right now Trump is actually winning a few of these rogue judges that are trying to put the kibosh on his administration so far. He's winning some of these cases, actually most of them so far. Justin Plaster says sabotage. Not sure if I agree with that so far. So far, with leaks notwithstanding, that's not from his own administration, though. That's from the holdovers, from what I would guess. So far, his administration has been in lockstep. Alex Pfeiffer says, leaks can kill. Rogue judges are inconvenient and should be ignored. That's a really good answer. Leaks indeed can kill. That's the big concern. One of the big concerns with this, other than actually thwarting Trump's agenda, is not only are you thwarting Trump's agenda when it comes to deportations, especially violent illegals, you're also putting in harm's way the ICE officers. So that's a good take, Alex. Brian says the dissident right that will not take any win because they haven't gotten all their wins. I don't know what the dissident right is anymore, but what I think they are, I follow several of them on social media, and most of them are really happy. So Montana to AAZ says, other. Trump's executive orders may be fantastic, but they're 100% temporary. If Congress doesn't get these executive orders legislated in these first 2 years, most of the EOs will be for naught. With the exception of Massey, no other Republican seems to be doing anything but posting Dems own, or Dem owns, I should say, on X. DC says Susie Wiles is the biggest threat to the new Trump administration. Would like to see your evidence or rationale behind that quip. Next, we'll go to Control Group Randy. Rhinos. Unvaccinated employee says other lack of follow-through, both real and perceived. There must be real measurable positive results for the electorate. Adam Avery says upcoming bird flu scamdemic. Getting PTSD from that. Marshall Goodnow says other Republicans. Tom Bazika says combination of lawfare and uniparty obstruction. John says disloyal Republicans. Tom says Senate rhinos. Andy says reliance on Mike Johnson and John Thune. Dr. Griffin says leaks or other sabotage from within the executive branch. Lisa says the blob's efforts behind the curtain to undermine Trump's agenda and to get him into a war. Jay Breezy says the limp-wristed, feckless, do-nothing GOP. John Albert says Donald Trump himself. Still disagree with that. Erica says Congress. CS says, continues the media-crafted hoaxes. I don't know, the media, they're dealing with the media well, so far so good. I don't really see any hoaxes being foisted so far, like the Russiagate hoax, which really hampered Trump right out the gate in his first administration. Daniel says Republicans in Congress, and Baker says Congress, and Charles says other rhinos. So I'm sensing a theme in the other category here, Republicans. Once again, for the second straight week, my audience are not a bunch of slouches. You guys weren't born yesterday.
You're listening to the AM Update, Week in Review. Follow on X and Instagram at Real AM Update.
One of the biggest serial killer mysteries of all time, the identity of Jack the Ripper, has finally been solved, according to a British researcher who's now seeking legal confirmation on behalf of a victim's family. Over a century after he murdered and mutilated London women in 1888, the long mythologized killer's identity has allegedly been confirmed by DNA found on a shawl. It's according to historian Russell Edwards. Edwards claimed that Aaron Kosminski, a Polish barber who was 23 at the time of the murders, is the Ripper, based on what he said. And it's a 100% match with DNA found on the attire piece. Again, this is according to historian Russell Edwards, talking to Today Australia in a February 1st interview. Kosminski was a suspect in the original investigation, but was never arrested. So, Jack the Ripper, Aaron Kosminski. I'm calling complete and total BS. Let me ask Grok right now, in real time. What are the most stereotypical and common first names of serial killers. Let's see what Grok comes up with. I'm calling BS. John, David, Richard, Ted, Jeffrey, Ed, Charles, Robert. Serial killers are not named Aaron. I like my name, by the way, but that's a terrible serial killer name. You gotta be named something like Ted, David, even Timothy. John Wayne Gacy. Aaron is not a serial killer's name. It's just not. So for that reason alone, I'm calling BS on this entire story. No, Jack the Ripper's true identity remains an enigma. Because it just can't be that Jack the Ripper, one of the most mythologized, probably most mythologized serial killers in Western civilization over the past 150 years, there's no way that his name is Aaron. And I'm not trying to defend myself here. Like I said, I like my name. I know I have enough self-awareness to admit that my name is not a serial killer name. Of course, that's exactly what somebody who's a serial killer might want you to think. More again tomorrow.
This has been the AM Update Week in Review. The AM Update will be back on Monday and every weekday at 4 a.m. Eastern Time.